Apologize for my tardiness. I was out trying to take a look at the Kansas Forest Service aircraft out at Billard Field. So if you guys have the opportunity before 4 o'clock, I'd encourage you to do that. With that in mind, now that we're getting started, do we have any requests for bill introductions today? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and welcome Jeff Samuda, Secretary for the Kansas Department of Corrections, who's going to provide us with an update over the state of the Corrections Department. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's good to be here with you today. I'm Jeff Samuda. I'm the Secretary for the Kansas Department of Corrections, and it's a pleasure to be able to present to you here today. So I'm going to give you an overview of the juvenile and criminal justice systems today. We're going to talk about workforce retention and initiatives, proposed budget enhancements and capital improvement projects, some agency updates, and then just briefly go through the governor's budget recommendations for our agency. Talk a little bit about the juvenile and adult justice systems. So this slide kind of gives you an idea how the system is structured both under the judicial and executive branches. Supervision of adults in Kansas communities involves both the judicial and executive branches of government as well as state and local government. The box on the left summarizes persons on probation who are supervised by the judicial branch through court services officers. They supervise persons with misdemeanor Kansas convictions who are assessed as low risk to reoffend but convicted of a felony, and misdemeanor compact probation cases with a conviction in another state but for employment or family issues are transferred to Kansas for supervision under terms of an interstate compact agreement between 50 states. The box on the right summarizes supervision of persons by the executive branch. Here, Kansas provides funding to local boards of county commissioners through a grant program administered by our agency to operate local community corrections programs. Those community corrections programs, through their county employees, supervise persons with Kansas convictions for felony crimes who are assessed as moderate or high risk to offend. There's also persons who are supervised and receiving substance abuse treatment under Senate Bill 123. Parole officers are state employees who work for KDOC, supervise persons released from Kansas prisons on either post-release supervision, and those are post-1993 court cases, or parole, which are pre-1993 court cases, so a little bit different status there. In addition, KDOC parole officers also supervise felony compact probation cases with a conviction in another state under that interstate compact agreement that I referenced earlier. So the map illustrates the location of our 1 juvenile and our 8 adult facilities operated by our agency. We have 1 adult facility for women, 7 for men, and both the female and male juveniles are housed at our juvenile facility here in Topeka. We also have satellite facilities for adults located in Stockton, Oswego, and Wichita Work Release that are operated under the umbrella of a nearby correctional facility. And this map illustrates the location of our 17 parole offices who supervise adult post-release and parole offenders statewide. The yellow line denotes the northern and southern parole regions as we've designated them. The next few slides, I want to provide you a sense of the number of adults in the criminal justice system that we see. On this graph, we see a number of adults on probation supervised by local community corrections agencies. The number declined significantly in 2021, which can probably be attributed to COVID-19 and the decreased activity that we saw in the Kansas courts. That's not rebounded yet. It did not rebound in 2022, but many in the state believe, me included, that those numbers will rebound as the courts clear out a backlog of cases. This map illustrates adults admitted into our correctional facilities by county. The greatest numbers come from Sedgwick, Johnson, Wyandotte, Shawnee, Leavenworth, Reno, and Salina counties. generally the larger population areas of our state, as you might expect. And this map is the inverse of the prior slide. This is releases back into the community, and the greatest number of releases are typically back to those same counties. Duration of confinement in our adult facilities. Sometimes the assumption is made that a person is sentenced to prison for a long period of time. They kind of go away and they're not seen again. And while that's certainly the case for some, we also have a significant number of individuals who serve relatively short sentences. If you look on that graph and you take the three blue bars to the left, that's people that are incarcerated 2 years or less. That's 39% of our adult population. Slide reflects most serious active offenses associated with adults in our correctional facilities. Crime categories with the greatest numbers. For males, there's other person, non-sex offense. That's 48% of our population. Crimes against a person that are sex-related, that's 25%. And then our males have 18% that are drug crimes. For our females, the two largest percentage categories are drug offenses, number one at 42%, and then other persons, non-sex, 39%. Data on this slide reflects the number of persons under supervision by our parole officers in the community after having served their sentence in our correctional facilities. On the slide, in-state offenders are people supervised in Kansas. Out of state are Kansas offenders supervised by other states under that interstate compact. The data also reflects the number of persons who have absconded from supervision. This map illustrates the imprisonment rate per 100,000 persons in each of the states. Kansas ranks 28th in this data for 2020 at 298 persons per 100,000. Being ranked in the middle of the spectrum has been typical for Kansas for a number of years. Talk a little bit about or maybe a little more than a little bit, about the juvenile justice system. So this slide kind of, you start to the left with the red boxes and follow the arrow moving right as I'm speaking here. You kind of see the flow of the system. Supervision of juvenile offenders in Kansas also involves both the judicial and executive branches of state government, again, as well as local, another state government, much like with adults as I discussed previously, but with some important differences. In the juvenile justice system, KDOC funds and Board of County Commissioners through their local juvenile corrections agencies and county employees begin serving alleged juvenile offenders at the point of arrest. First point would be juvenile intake. They are contacted by law enforcement at this point, at the point of arrest, to assess the risks and needs of the youth and inform decisions to release or send the juvenile to detention. Juvenile intake also serves children in need of care who are removed from their home by law enforcement to help find a temporary placement before Department of Children's and Families and the court become involved. Next step might be immediate intervention program. Under reforms enacted in 2016 with Senate Bill 367, every youth arrested for a misdemeanor who does not have prior offenses is provided an opportunity to not have a formal criminal record by participating in and completing an immediate intervention program. In adult corrections, this would be called the diversion. It's the same concept, just different terminology. These are also funded by KDOC and operated by the county. The next steps in the process would be prosecution or the courts. Obviously, those are not operated or funded by KDOC. Like adults, here some adjudicated juvenile offenders are also supervised on probation by the judicial branch court service officers. Then there's community supervision of adjudicated juvenile offenders, and that's the responsibility of the executive branch. Supervision that is again under the Board of County Commissioners by county employees utilizing funds from grants administered by KDOC, much like the adult system. A key difference from the adult system is that these same county employees supervise youth who have served their sentence at the Kansas Juvenile Correctional Complex, our facility, and are under community supervision on conditional release. Conditional release is comparable in function to adult parole, but is done by county employees instead of KDOC employees. And then there's the Kansas Juvenile Correctional Complex, our facility. It's the one juvenile facility that remains operated by the state for both young men and women. It's here in Topeka. Again, it's the juvenile equivalent of adult prison. And then equally important to achieving that end goal that you see over in the far green box, end goal of contributing to a healthy, contributing young adult, are the people and services that you see in that blue bar that's just below that top row of boxes. The most effective juvenile justice systems are able to bring each of those together for the success of those youth.
Mr. Secretary, I believe you're one slide behind.
Am I one behind? I apologize.
Oh, you're all right.
I apologize.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So beginning with this slide, I'm going to quickly provide some data to give you a sense of the number of youth involved in the various parts of the juvenile justice system. Here we see a decline in the number of youth who law enforcement brought to juvenile intake and assessments when we compare 2018 to 2022. Those are fiscal years. This is both alleged child in need of care and juvenile offenders. The dip in 2021, again, could probably be attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic. Juvenile intake and assessment services is performed by individual or groups of counties providing services statewide. The core goal, again, is to determine what is happening with youth, make sure they're safe, decisions for that night, later the prosecutor in court, and either child welfare or the formal criminal justice system will decide what the appropriate next steps are. Intake is an event, it's not a place, and it's not a program of any duration. It's very quick. Children and youth are brought to juvenile intake, law enforcement custody as the general rule, but families can also make that referral for juvenile intake. Facts of the current event and any available family history are gathered, screening for risk and needs is completed, and resources in the community are identified to refer the family to. Juvenile intake by county. This is the same intake data on a map so you can gain a sense of where the higher volumes of intakes occur. The gold counties have the highest number: Sedgwick, Johnson, Wyandotte, and Shawnee. Again, those communities typically have those counties typically have the largest communities in the state, so that's not surprising. Juveniles in the intermediate intervention program, those participants are also on the decline. And the IIP begins after juvenile intake, so less intakes results in fewer youth in need of IIP. In the adult system, again, it would be referred to as diversion. The goal is to intervene in alleged juvenile offending behavior and do so without the full weight of the court or getting them too deep into the juvenile justice system. An IIP agreement between youth and the IIP staff is developed. It's not intended to be an intervention, stay out of trouble, maybe attend a program in the community. In the end, the case will not be formally adjudicated and keeping the youth's record clean. That helps them in the future, whether it's applications to college, getting a job, joining the military, all those things that a criminal record can impact. This slide represents those youth on probation, supervised by local juvenile community corrections agencies only, not court services. Again, a decline from FY 2018 to FY 2022, and a dip in FY 21, again, attributable to COVID-19. These are youth with misdemeanor or felony adjudications, conviction in adult terms. who are supervised by local juvenile community corrections agencies. And again, these figures do not include probationers supervised by the judicial branch court services officers. Juveniles at the Kansas Juvenile Correctional Complex, the facility we operate here in Kansas. Youth at the KJCC follow the same trend as intake, IIP, and probation. Fewer Kansas youth are committing crimes. It's a great thing for our communities and the future of those youth. Since the late 1990s, Kansas law has defined a sentencing matrix to define which youth a court may sentence to secure confinement in a correctional facility. This is not the same matrix for adult offenders. In the early 2000s, on a given day, Kansas would have nearly 600 youth housed in one of 4 juvenile correctional facilities in the state, a number that has gradually declined over the decades and allows Kansas to close the other 3 facilities in 2008, 2009, and 2017. Today, we have 144 youth at KJCC. 12 of those are girls, and the remainder are boys. This is the same residents from KJCC on June 30th, 2022. Similar to the data for the intake shows, most residents coming to KJCC are from Sedgwick, Johnson, Wyandotte, and Shawnee counties. Most serious offenses. Youth at KJCC are almost entirely adjudicated for prison crimes, and all are felonies. Reforms under Senate Bill 367 now prohibit misdemeanor juveniles offenders being sent to this facility and limit the use of the facility to higher crimes and moderate or high risk to offend youth. As I referenced previously, conditional release is the equivalent to adult parole. Here we see the greatest decline in the data I've shared today, which also reflects reforms under Senate Bill 367. In the past, conditional release was required. Now the court has a choice to order a term of conditional supervision release, and terms of supervision are typically shorter in many instances. This map illustrates the rate per 100,000 youth in each state who are confined in secure detention, secure correctional facilities, or residential facilities, some secure, some unsecure, as a juvenile offender. At 113 youth per 100,000, Kansas is in the middle, ranked 27th among the states, after having been in the mid to high 30s for much of the 2000s and early 2010s. Similar to Kansas, most states have been very successful in successfully reducing use of these facilities. Nationally, the number of youth in these facilities has declined by 65% from 1997 through 2019. This slide summarizes the overall agency budget, expenditures, and a portion of the investment in juvenile and criminal justice in Kansas. So this is our budget, kind of dissected out. Obviously, KDOC is only a part of the criminal justice systems. We've got law enforcement, prosecutors, defense, courts, treatment services, and all additional costs, in addition to the costs of property loss to crime, injury, and suffering of victims and families, both victims and those of the offenders. The greatest portion of our almost $500 million of expenditures in FY22 was for adult facility operations and medical care. Our cost to incarcerate our adults is about $112 per day, or about $41,000 annually, and for youth it's about $514 per day, or about $187,000 annually. So we'll talk a little bit about workforce retention and initiatives. Staffing for everybody is just a challenge, not just in corrections and law enforcement, but certainly in corrections. It's impacting nearly every state Department of Corrections nationally. Everybody's experiencing unprecedented difficulty in recruiting new staff and retaining existing staff. A couple of states, I've got some states on this slide, but a couple of states, California and Nebraska, are having greater success than others. Two states that are either historically, and that would be California, they pay a pretty high rate of pay, so they haven't had much problem. Or recently, Nebraska significantly increased their pay, and they've dedicated themselves to being among the top paying correctional agencies in the country. They've had some success in keeping their positions filled, more so than anybody else I know. Some of our challenges in correction, I've got them listed there on the slide, some that are always present and some that are some new challenges for us. Again, like others, everyone out there having some issues recruiting and retaining a workforce. Never been easy in the field of corrections due to the risk associated with the work, the 24/7 work schedules, and the demands on employees, both physically, emotionally, and mentally. It's just really hard to attract people to the role and then keep them. We've also experienced, like everyone else, the last 2 to 3 years, there just doesn't seem to be as many people out there in the workforce, just not as many people interested in giving corrections a try. What we hear from our staff and people that are sort of interested is that the work doesn't offer enough choices that most employees want, flexible schedules, maybe remote work, and that's just something in a lot of our positions, correctional officer being a good example, that we're just not able to offer. We need to have people on site, on a schedule, that type thing. Again, a look at what a couple of our neighboring states are doing, Colorado and Nebraska. I referenced Nebraska a little bit ago. Entry pay for a correctional officer for us is $18.26 an hour, plus there's a couple of differentials that are added onto that, $1.50 and $2 for a total of $21.76. And I'm going to talk about the 24/7 plan and differentials here in just a second. So if you're a correctional officer with us, you're in all of our facilities, you're making $21.76 with those differentials on top. Seen a lot of, both in the private and the public sector, have seen a lot of entities offering hiring bonuses, retention bonus. That's something that we're not able to do. The state statute doesn't allow, there is a bonus provision in state statute, but it's very restrictive and it doesn't allow for any type of bonuses for recruitment or retention. Again, Nebraska is a good study. They're our neighbor, and just because of the success they've had, they reduced their vacancies significantly and brought in about 250 people from out of state with what they did with their pay. So some of you are familiar with the 24/7 pay plan, some may not, so I'm going to go through that briefly and just reset so everybody knows what's occurred here in the last couple of years. So the 24/7 facility pay plan was recommended by Governor Kelly in November of 2021 and subsequently approved by the legislature. Plan addressed the needs of multiple state agencies, not just KDOC. And was targeted towards, for us, it was targeted towards uniform staff, our unit team staff, which are kind of our non-uniformed case managers, if you will, in our facilities, and then our parole officers who are supervising offenders out in the community. Also, new adult and juvenile correctional officers became eligible for some step increases for periodically over the first 12 months of their employment. That was included in the base pay part of it. Then the second component of the 24/7 facility pay plan established new pay differentials for staff assigned to a correctional facility. So differential one, each employee assigned to a correctional facility, whether they're in uniform or not, as their official work location, receive an additional $1.50 per hour. Differential two, all uniform security staff, counselors, and unit team at facilities receive another $2 an hour. So if you're a correctional officer, you've got the $1.50 plus another $2. Differential 3 really didn't impact us much, as more for the state hospitals and veterans, because it typically went for medical staff, nurses primarily, and we have one nurse that is a state employee. Most of the rest of our medical is all contracted through a private provider. But for nurses or medical staff, that was an additional $4.50 per hour. And then differential 4, each employee who's eligible for either differential 1 and their assignment has a vacancy rate of 25% or greater is eligible to receive another $2.50 an hour. So KDO staff who are eligible for differentials 1, differential 2, and differential 4 receive a total of an additional $6 per hour on top of their base pay rate. Today, that includes staff, not all staff, but uniform staff, at 6 facilities of our six of our facilities: El Dorado, Ellsworth, Lansing, Larned, Norton, and the Kansas Juvenile Correctional Complex here in Topeka. The differentials are funded as temporary through fiscal year 2023. Here's the impact of the plan. This graphic illustrates our vacancy trend in the 6 months before and 12 months after the 24/7 facility pay plan was implemented. The blue columns that are vertical are uniformed officer vacancies each week. That gold dotted line that runs from left to right is a trend line from July 2021 through December 2022. Had no pay plan been approved and this trend continued, we may have seen nearly 900 vacancies by the end of last calendar year. Beginning in late January 2022, the blue columns slowly decrease, but at a rate that's not improving operations or working environment for staff. Feedback from our staff is that the 24/7 facility pay plan has helped them stay as they're earning better wages. What I don't believe it's helping us do is recruit people into the role. We're struggling with that. In mid-January of 2021, we had our highest number of vacancies among uniformed staff at 475. And as of late December 2022, we had 371 vacancies. So it's improved a little bit. And then here's a snapshot of vacancies as of January 2023. Average uniformed vacancy rate of adult facilities is 21%. That's our uniformed staff, our correctional officers, correctional supervisors. Again, we have 4 adult facilities are above 25% vacancy rate. The parole vacancy rate is at 10%. That's up from what it normally is. We've had quite a bit of turnover in parole. And then uniform vacancy rate at our juvenile facility is 38%, way too high. It's not just correctional facility staff. While uniform and non-uniform vacancies in our facilities are really our greatest number, the impact of the labor market is really felt in nearly every job classification across the Department of Corrections. After the multiple pay plans last year, the 24/7 and the additional 5% that was appropriated, our parole staff continue to be paid less than their peers working as court services officers in the judicial branch. They're doing very much the same work. Parole pay starts at $22.16 an hour, and court services officers typically have job openings posting at $25.46 an hour. So we've got a little over $3 an hour disparity there, and it's hard to be competitive and retain good staff when they have those opportunities to go elsewhere. Our FY 2022 parole officer turnover was at a historical high, 29%. Typically, it's about 23% turnover. And multiple examples in other job types where we have difficulty having people apply for the jobs, having qualified candidates apply for the jobs. Positions like our maintenance, our admin support staff, our accountants, legal, just really a difficulty recruiting people to all of our positions. So what's increasingly clear to us is we have to become an employer who can draw new employees away from a current job, which is kind of difficult to pull people away from a job they already have. This map here is from the Department of Labor and reflects individuals receiving payment on unemployment claims. So we look at this information internally, where the number of these individual claimants are who are receiving the unemployment in counties where our facilities are located. So how many people in the area are unemployed and drawing claims, and maybe give us a sense of what kind of a workforce is out there. So I'll give you some quick numbers. For our Lansing facility, we have 100 total vacancies at that facility, and there were 100 total claimants drawing unemployment insurance at this snapshot in time. So we'd have to capture every one of those. That's not saying there's not other people looking for work, but these are people that are actively looking. So in Leavenworth County, there were only 100 at the time that we pulled this information. Our facility in Norton has 60 total vacancies, and there were only 2 individuals drawing unemployment claims in Norton County. Our El Dorado facility has 98 total vacancies, and there were 90 individual claimants in Butler County. And then our facility at Larned has 35 total vacancies, and there was no one drawing individual unemployment claims in Pawnee County at the time. We've put a lot into our recruiting efforts. It's a daily priority, is to recruit and retain our staff. It's the focus of what we're doing today, first and foremost. We've engaged our leaders statewide, our staff from all levels of the agency, and utilized ideas from other agencies to connect with persons seeking employment. And we continue to welcome and explore solutions that may help us with our recruitment and retention. We have a next step in that. Some states, our peers in other DOCs, have worked with some firms with specific expertise in recruitment and retention, and they've seen resulting, when they've partnered with those firms, they've seen an increase in the number of applications and some retention improvement. So we determined that in spite of our efforts, that's what we're going to do. So we put out an RFP, and we have a contractor selected that's going to come in, do an assessment of our practices, tell us what we're doing well, tell us what we could be doing better, and then give us some really specific recommendations and guide us of what we might be able to do to improve our recruitment and retention. I think we have a kickoff meeting for that next week. So money's important. Everybody has to pay their bills. But along with that, we've got to take care of our employees in this environment. That's the only way we get to a better spot. Research helps us better understand the effects our work environment has on our employees, and we've listed a number of things that are impacting them. Our people witness, participate, hear things that it's hard to get out of your mind. It's tough stuff. They're first responders to someone that's in a bad way, and it's traumatic for them. So we've got to provide some training and resources to help them with the effects of that trauma and the stress of the job, and now the excessive overtime and burnout, if you will, that many of them are experiencing. And wellness for those employees not only helps them professionally and personally, but overall, I believe it'll help us with retention. So we've got an emphasis on that. Some rather brief agency updates. So traditionally, when we've talked about capacity in our facilities, we've talked about the number of beds that we have available to house people. That's how it's been over the decades. And the script has changed just a little bit. Today we talk about what's our staffing capacity. What do we have enough staff numbers in order to house? How many people can we house given our numbers? We've closed units at each facility. It's resulted in about nearly 1,600 beds that we've mothballed. So when you close a unit that you would normally operate with staff, you can take those staff and redeploy them and augment your staffing, improve your staffing levels in the other units. And that's, quite frankly, that's what we've had to do to keep operating. With our recent population fluctuating around 8,560, based upon available staff and those units that are closed, we're at about 97% of our staffed capacity. Typically, our bed capacity is over 10,000. It's about 10,200, 10,300. Today, we're operating at about 8,700, I think, something like that. So we're also seeing the population grow. Those courts have opened back up after the pandemic, and you just see a steady climb in our adult population. At some point, we're going to have an intersection of our adult population growing and our staffing and our ability to staff. And it's going to get to a point where we may not have the staff to take more in. So that may mean having to look to contract with county jails, as we've had to do in the past, or potentially contract with a private provider, and that could mean going out of state. So we need to improve our staffing situation. We need to find a way to improve it, and quickly, because the numbers are growing. Excited about our opportunities to help. Part of our mission is to incarcerate people and protect the public, take folks that have hurt others and keep them so they don't have an opportunity to do that while they serve their sentence. And the other part of our mandate is try to fix folks, try to help them get rehabilitated, get on their feet, get going on a better way of life. And that's what the next few slides reflect what we're trying to do there. So Pell Grant opportunities have now been opened up for people who are incarcerated. And in 2019, our higher ed partners and we formed the Kansas Consortium of Corrections for Higher Education. We have 9 college partners statewide. They are great partners, fantastic partners. We now have Pell-eligible college programming at all correctional facilities. We've seen a 50% increase in participation in post-secondary programs in the past year, the majority able to access Pell Grants. Now, when I talk about post-secondary education opportunities, that's not necessarily a 4-year degree. It might be a 2-year associate's degree, or it might be a vocational technical certification. All those benefit the population, and I think I can speak to that a little later. So this is a snapshot illustrating the impact of the Second Chance Pell in our facilities. So you've got some numbers there that I think there's a 20-year snapshot, and then there's a 2-year snapshot, and you can see there's pretty good difference. It's moving. In the past 20 years, on average, we've had 37 residents per year earn a degree or certification. So over a 20-year period, it was about 37 people per year. In the past 2 years, the average has been about 173 per year. So it's really, really been a difference maker. And again, as Pell funding becomes more available to residents, we anticipate that access to that funding will be greater, but our challenge will quickly become 2 things. The ability to have enough people to deliver the instruction, and then space, and the right space. We don't have enough space today to expand our program. Certainly not, maybe at some facilities, but not most. So 2 sessions ago, the legislature passed House Bill 2401, that was in 2021 session, authorizing our agency to be able to form a 501c3 nonprofit for the purpose of building our vision of a career campus, developing more of the right space and aim towards educational and vocational technical training for our population. So we formed that 501c3. We're good to go on that. Our current work is focused, we've got a consultant in the Kansas City area that has experience in fundraising and working for nonprofit organizations. So we're working with them on a marketing plan and a way to get out there and see if there's foundations, private entities, whatnot, that would be willing to help us achieve that vision. Some of the feedback we've initially received is donors may be reluctant to contribute to such a plan if the state doesn't have a stake in it. So based upon that, we've proposed in our 5-year capital improvement plan a $10 million investment for FY 2025. It's about a $40 million project. Now, that can be scaled into phases, but overall, it's about $40 million. We also, last year, received appropriations for about $6.7 million for new investments in technical education and equipment. We're excited about this. It's going to allow us to have Wi-Fi, tablets, some more equipment for training of the population. The Wi-Fi equipment's starting to come in. We think we'll have Wi-Fi for our population statewide by late spring of this year. Once that equipment's installed, we'll have about 1,000 tablets and 1,000 laptops available for our population to use. What it'll mean is they can go back to their living quarters and work on their homework or work on that job resume or all those kinds of things. And it just helps us a little bit with the space issue and allows them to keep active in it. It's really good use of their time. The CDL simulators have not been ordered. We're working with our college partners to determine where best to place those, and I'm sure we'll get that worked out soon. And then we've ordered some virtual welders to expand welding training at our facilities at Winfield, like we have at Ellsworth and Lansing facilities. So besides it's a charge of ours to help rehabilitate people, why would we do this? There's a number of circumstances and resources that factor into the success of a person when they return to the community after being incarcerated, but there's no singular factor that supports success greater than a job that pays a sustainable living wage. We know that those who obtain a job that pays a sustained living wage upon their release are 1/3 less likely to return to prison. 1/3. That moves the needle. That job helps provide other stabilizing factors, which again helps them keep from getting back to the life they're accustomed to. It provides housing, transportation, helps them pay their debts, their court obligations, their child support, and it addresses the needs of their family that without that, they may be on public assistance. They're also paying taxes. We have a number of fantastic private industry partners who partner with us at each of our 8 adult facilities. We have 40 private industry partners in addition to our traditional correctional industry opportunities. The 1st of January, we had nearly 1,400 people in our population involved in private industries. That's 16% of the residential population working. From July of 2019 to January 2023, our private industry employment and opportunities for our residents has increased by 48%. We went from 937 to 1,387, nearly 1,400. In fiscal year 2022, those residents earned $27.7 million. That income pays for, beyond paying their taxes, as you and I would, beyond that income pays for 25% of their wage goes towards housing costs that we accrue when they're in correctional facilities. Those funds are deposited into Kansas Correctional Industries Program for reinvestment in the program. That's in statute. 10% goes to their savings, so they have money upon release for housing, transportation, other needs. They pay their court obligations, their fines, their fees, child support, and then again, they contribute to their families. So it's a great program for us. A couple of renovation projects we have underway. They've been underway for a while, and they're coming to a close, so pretty exciting. talk a little bit about the Winfield project. The units at Winfield were designed to be a nursing home, and they were under the authority of the Veterans Administration here. They were underutilized. They really weren't being utilized for the veterans. So we had a need for a geriatric facility, if you will, and a cognitive care facility. So those were transferred to us. Governor recommended, legislature funded funds for us to renovate them for our use. That's been underway for some time now. Once we've completed repairs and rehabilitation of the units, not only our residents that are going to live there, but our residents system-wide will benefit from that. It'll free up our a bunch of our infirmary beds in our other facilities and make those open to some of our general population. But for the most part, at Winfield, we have about 240 beds that'll come online there. About 180 of those will be dedicated to our geriatric population. We have our population's getting a little bit older. They have some chronic medical care issues. Some have cognitive care issues, whether it be dementia, Alzheimer's. And so we're going to place them there, place a focus on that care. And then the other 60 beds are going to be aides, people to help maintain the facility, and we're going to place people that have a substance abuse need for that kind of programming in there. So they'll help maintain the facility, work as aides, whatnot, but they'll also be receiving substance abuse programming. And then we have a project that's in a building, or a couple of the buildings that were closed when the new Lansing facility, minimum custody, was opened a couple years back. This is going to be about 200 beds at what they used to call the X unit at Lansing, and we're going to provide substance abuse treatment there and potentially work release. We'd like to develop another work release. Our primary work release today is Wichita work release. That's about 250 beds, I believe, in Wichita, and we need a more regional approach to work release. You're trying to get people closer and getting jobs where they're going to release. So we're going to try to get work release going there. Current estimated completion is February of this year. However, our ability to staff this facility is a concern. I think we'll be able to staff the facility at Winfield all right. We've got pretty good headway on that, but we can't staff. We're having difficulty staffing what we have at Lansing already. So we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do when that unit is turned over to us. Staff at both Lansing and El Dorado facilities have been on 12-hour shifts for 18 months, and we've got to find a way away from that. Thanks to the legislature, last year we had appropriations provided to raise the 2 honor camps that were closed in 2009. We're thankful for that. At least one of those is on federal land, and they'd fallen in disrepair and were really in poor shape and could become a safety hazard. So work is underway on those. Those 2 camps were located at El Dorado and Toronto Lake locations. So we're thankful we got the funds to do that. Much like some other agencies, we've had some aging data systems. We have a primary data system that was developed in 1978 that thankfully we're going to be able to put to rest when this Athena project is completed. It's both a juvenile and adult data system. You see phase 1 deployed in the spring of 2021. We've got some bugs to continue to work out. We think we'll have that done by the spring of this year. Phase 2 is under development right now. We're working, Microsoft is our vendor, and we believe we'll be deploying phase 2 in the summer of 2023 and be able to put to bed some of those aging systems, and we're very, very thankful for that. Along with an aging data system, we have some aging facilities. And I know some of you have been out in our facilities and seen them, and we have a lot of maintenance and repair issues. We have some facilities that were built in the parts of them were built in the 1800s. So we felt like we needed to get someone to come in and do an assessment and tell us what's most critical, kind of get a priority and an order of things, because they're, you have limited funds. So we posted a request for proposal in 2021, seek a qualified firm to do the assessment of the facilities, help inform us and the governor's office and you folks on future needs or repair, and if necessary, or replacement of facilities. Those reports were received in June of this past year. So we have over 3.6 million square feet and 254 buildings that were constructed between 1860 and 2015. We did not assess the new facility at Lansing. We didn't see any purpose in doing that. We've only been in that for 2 years. Given the age of many of them, the assessment identified some significant needs for repair or replacement, and that's really not surprising. The identified total capital investment needs exceed $338 million, and much of that, $164 million, is recommended as immediate needs, and another $173 million over the next 10 years. Now, realistically, the legislature cannot appropriate $338 million to address our maintenance and repair needs, and nor would we ever be able to manage that volume of projects. But we need to come up with a plan to systematically and maybe more aggressively start addressing those issues, or we're going to fall further and further behind. And then finally, Mr. Chairman, going to talk just a little bit about the governor's budget recommendations for our agencies. Includes a number of items that are critical to our needs, and I hope that they receive the support from the legislature in the months ahead. Some of the key items recommended include fully funding our healthcare contract. I mentioned earlier we're contracted for our healthcare for our population, and then our debt service on that Athena project. We finance that, if you will. Some investments in scheduled replacement of predominantly security equipment and vehicles. We're grateful for that recommendation. And then improved retirement benefits for some KDOC staff, moving then from corrections capers to Kansas Police and Fire. And more details to come on that. And then a statewide pay plan, 5% base pay for all employees. And then for some employees, a market adjustment to bring people who are farther away than 5% of market within 5% of market. So 5%, and for some employees, an additional bump to get them within that market window there. And then finally, funding for the demolition or raising of the closed buildings at the Lansing Correctional Facility, and to build a new warehouse that is incorporated in that old facility. It's part of the old facility. So when we raise that building, we'll build a new warehouse on the site of the Lansing facility. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thanks again for the opportunity to appear before you, and I'm here for any questions you may have.
All right. Thank you, Secretary Zmuda. It's incredibly informative, I'm sure, for some of our new members. So I've got some questions, but we'll go to the committee. Who has some questions for the Secretary? Representative Schlingensiepen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a rather pedestrian question. In a couple of these meetings, I've heard about pre-1993, post-1993. Were there changes in sentencing guidelines? That some are convicted under pre-1993 and others under post, and that's the reason for the distinction, or is there some other aspect here?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, that is exactly it. Some people are sentenced under the law changed. There were modifications to sentencing laws. Some people are sentenced pre-1993 and some are after that. Exactly right. Sorry, I didn't explain that better.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yep. Representative Carmichael, and then Representative Butler and Resman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By a nod of the head, can you hear me, as they say?
Yep, we can hear you.
Good. I apologize, Secretary Zmuda, that I couldn't be there. I felt ill yesterday afternoon, and I don't think people would have wanted to be very close to me for a while. There's two areas, though, that I would like to inquire, but I'll try to do it quickly. One has to do with employee pay, and the second has to do with what you've explained to us about the increased incidence of strokes, heart attacks, et cetera, in your employ, for the employees within your employ. The 5% increase that the governor has prescribed or has recommended in her budget, does that just go to base pay, or does that include the differentials that you explained earlier?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I'm not the last word expert on this, but my understanding would be that if it's approved, it would be applied to the base pay. So as it was applied to employee pay, you would back the differentials off, apply it to the base rate, and then the differentials would be applied again. So it wouldn't be 5% on top of the differentials. If that
The
makes sense.
differential pay would not be included in the 5% increase. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, Representative, I didn't catch it. Could you repeat that?
The differential pay, it would not be, employees only get 5% increase on their base, not including differential pay. Is that what you understand the governor has proposed?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, that is my understanding, and that's typically how you apply a base pay increase. I'm not 100% certain of that, but that's how I would think it's going to be applied.
And last year, most of the correctional employees received a one-time bonus of between $300 and $3,500, as I recollect. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we had exempt employees who were exempt status under FALSA code received a one-time bonus of up to, I believe, $3,500. But a number of our employees were not, and they received that because they were not eligible for the differentials, if that makes sense. But a number of employees did not receive a bonus.
The employees who are eligible for differential pay did not receive the bonus?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, they would not have received a bonus as part of that pay plan. We may have had some employees that received a bonus based upon meritorious service in other areas. You know, they came up with a cost savings idea, or they did some extraordinary work, and they may have received a bonus, but they would not have received that bonus that was associated with the pay plan that those exempt employees received.
To try to wrap this up, a number of my constituents who work for DOC believe that even with the 5% increase, but with no one-time bonus, and the 5% increase not applying to their differential pay, they will be paid less this fiscal year, or this coming fiscal year, than they were last fiscal year. Is that possible? That may be what we're doing to people who work for you?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, well, I suppose that could be the case. There's not a plan to authorize the one-time bonuses in the recommendation this year. So people that receive the $3,500 as a bonus in the last go-round, that is not in the plan this year. So they would certainly not receive that amount.
How are we going to retain people by employing them less next year than they were paid last year? How can we expect that to work?
We'll call that a rhetorical question.
Thank you.
And
We'll
go ahead.
Let me
Go
get
ahead
my
and move
second
on.
question real quick on heart attacks, strokes, et cetera. Your employees have a higher incidence than the population at large. We had Chief Atterbury from the Kansas Peace Officers Association in day before yesterday, explaining to us that they would like to see law enforcement officers and first responders covered by the Kansas Workers' Compensation Act for those types of job-related events. Would your agency encourage the same thing for your employees?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, you know, I've not had that proposed to me before, but we'd certainly be open to that. I mean, a number of our staff are first responders, not all, but a number of our staff are first responders, and I suppose if a measure was coming forward, I'd certainly like to see them included if that's possible.
Please think about it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to juvenile intakes, just for my own information, just trying to understand it. You talked about that there's two different groups. You got those with families with need, and then juveniles who may have committed a crime of some sort, and they're both going through the intake system. How do you separate them out? I mean, are they in the same facility? If they are brought into a facility, how do they separate it out? Just so I can understand it.
Yeah, great question, Mr. Chairman, Representative. I'm going to try to answer, and my staff will tell me if I'm off base here, because they're really the experts on this. I think if the person is criminally involved, has committed some kind of an offense, and it's deemed that they need to be held, they would go to one type of facility, because that intake doesn't necessarily have to happen at a facility. You know, when I think of intake, it's typically they're coming in a facility. That's not what it is. It's just an event, and it can happen a number of different ways. So they do an assessment. If it's a person that's committed a crime, a youth that's committed a crime, then they would probably take them to one type of facility. If it's family coming forward saying, we're having problems managing our son or daughter, and then that assessment is done, is like, wow, yeah, we have to intervene here, I would assume they'd go to a different type of facility. If I got that right, Randy? You want to talk about it?
Randy, if you'd like to step up, he seems to have the answer, so we'll let him share.
Randy Bowman, Executive Director of Public Affairs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Secretary. Just to add to that just a little bit, because it is an interesting piece of Kansas government history that the juvenile justice agency is serving child in need of care, and really through community corrections, through Stuart Little's clients. But typically, an intake is going to be an arrest of one or two persons by a law enforcement officer, and best I've ever seen it work, if they had two things at once, they're going to bring them in separate patrol cars to, as Secretary said, for the event to happen, the activity to happen. Intake is not a facility except in your major metropolitans, so it's to an office. So there's some separation there when law enforcement drops them off. Hopefully, intake can call in two staff or have one waiting, so they're not kind of in the same rooms or those kind of things to the best they can. Do not want to suggest it's perfect, that they're not interacting. Then, as Secretary was talking about, so once intake does the process, does the assessment, recommends to law enforcement that this child should go home, this child should go to a temporary placement, or this child should go to detention, they're going to filter off to those separate types of facilities based on their individual needs. But yeah, we serve children in need of care is a little startling to new lawmakers. Yeah.
Something that we heard about just yesterday, actually, in our joint meeting, which is something we're going to talk even more about in future meetings. Representative Resman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned pay differentials, and they're only funded through 2023?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, yeah, my understanding is it's funded through FY 2023.
And so it'll end then, or is there a plan to continue with that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I'm hopeful there is. Yes, we need a plan. Yes, we need a plan to, we don't have that funding today, and we need that. If we lose that funding, we're going to lose a lot of people.
I hope to see it in my budget committee. The other thing too, I want to bring to everybody's attention that you didn't mention, but you did in the previous presentation, was that you have a lot of officers that are working 12-hour shifts, and some of them as long as 18 months, which I think is pretty extraordinary and actually pretty dangerous.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, thank you for that comment. I referenced just briefly, we have two facilities, our facility at El Dorado and our facility at Lansing, where we have our uniformed staff. Because we're so short, we have them on 12-hour shifts. That's over 18 months now. And when you're working a 12-hour shift and maybe somebody has to call in sick, or they have a sick child, or life happens, then typically that person, that 12-hour day becomes a 16-hour day. And we have staff. I try to get out and walk and talk to our staff at facilities. And we have staff at those facilities that are working 3, 4, some of them even 5 days a week. They're working 16-hour days. Some of it voluntary. Some of it, we need to hold them over. And it's just, it's an untenable set of circumstances. People, I'm concerned, we have very dedicated employees. And if you've been out in our facilities, if you've not been out, I invite you. You're welcome anytime. You'll see a lot of dedicated people working hard, and that's about what we're down to is the most dedicated people. But I worry that we're riding them hard, and we've been doing it for such a long period of time that we're at risk of hitting a breaking point with many of them. They can only do so much. So thank you for bringing me back to that. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Representative Heiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Secretary, for being here. I really appreciate my colleagues' questions about staff pay, because it's obviously a really critical issue. I've got a slightly different pay question. And I don't know if any of my colleagues have, but I've gotten emails asking me to end slavery in the U.S. prison system. And I don't think that's an accurate description of what's happening in Kansas anyway. But we all know that the pay for prisoners who are working prison jobs like maintenance and cafeteria is very low. And I talked to Randy and gave him some information indicating that commissary charges have gone up substantially over the last 10 years while that prison pay has been stagnant. And so I actually contacted the governor's budget people and asked if they could put an increase for that in your budget item. They didn't do it, but I understand they did allocate $3 million and some dollars for reducing the cost of phone calls from to 7 cents a minute from 14 cents a minute. So I guess I'm interested in one, if you were interested at some point in trying to increase the pay for people who do prison jobs, and or do you think that the governor's proposal is an adequate substitute for that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, it's a good point. So we have those private industry jobs I spoke about earlier, and those salaries or wages are determined by Department of Labor, and so that's a separate issue. But to the inside the fences type jobs at our facilities, we have traditional correctional industries, which we've raised those wages a little bit, but what we've not been able to do as of yet is our grounds maintenance, our custodial workers, folks that are just helping maintain the facility, that type thing. I'm told that those wages, and they're pretty minimal, have not been increased in decades, and yet the prices on our canteen commissary prices have continued to rise, particularly with inflation. They've really risen. So we're looking for a way to find a funding source to try to increase those wages and make it so when they work hard, they have an opportunity to put a little money away, maybe buy some canteen, maybe send a little money home to their family. So we're looking at ways to do that. Haven't found it yet. Sir, great question.
Representative Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, thanks for coming today. On the 12-hour shifts, what does a week look like for those folks? Is it a 3-day week or a 4-day week or split some other way? Just curious.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, I believe at those two facilities they're working 4 days a week on the 12, so there's some automatic built-in overtime there, and then of course they can volunteer for more. Some people you have to protect from themselves because they work a lot.
And then to follow up, if we were to look at a model closer, and this is just me speculating, understanding on your part as well, but if the state were to look at a model like what Nebraska's done, where you really get out in front of the wages, do you believe that would alleviate the labor problem for the most part? Especially, I'm curious about it, how you think that would play in some of the more rural facilities like Larned and Norton.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, that's a great point. So I unquestionably it would help. There's no doubt it will help and probably help significantly. But you raise the rural areas, and let's use Larned and Norton maybe as a couple of examples. You saw on my one map, I don't think there was anybody drawing unemployment in near our Larned facility. There's not a lot of folks out there that aren't unemployed. That are unemployed. So I don't know if there's a population out there for us to recruit. And I'll just anecdotally, at our Norton facility, we were there 6-8 weeks ago, and the warden was sharing with us that they've had people that were interested in relocating to Norton from out of state. Maybe they had family in the area or whatnot, and they were interested in coming to work at the correctional facility, but there was no housing. They could not find adequate housing, and I don't think that's anything new to people in the legislature, that housing is an issue in rural. So we're trying to get creative with some ways to maybe find some housing, but that's another factor. So I think it would help. I don't think in and of itself it's the total solution, but unquestionably I believe it would help.
Representative Turk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary, I tell you, it's probably not very often that you run into somebody sitting or standing or wherever in front of you that understands the 24-hour work cycle and then the stuff that you are talking about here today. I understand that the type of recruit that you're looking for requires a certain level of resilience not commonly found in the general population, especially now when everybody has a job and nobody has enough people to fill them. I see on your list of recruiting efforts, well, I don't see rather, is any kind of interaction or engagement with the members of your Kansas Air and Army National Guard or recruiting components in the state, given the nature of your job, given the nature of the type of employee that you're looking for. I can attest that that population is exactly whom you want to be in front of as often as you can. I know they meet monthly, and I happen to know where they meet. So if you're needing to bring your recruiters there, I'd love to chat with you afterwards. Maybe we can make some connections. And I do know that there are a lot of young, fresh recruits that are coming out that are trying to figure out where they're going to take their lives from that point. And coincidentally, you can both work and go to school in your line of work.
Yep.
So it's very convenient. So if any way I can assist, I'd gladly help there.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, thank you for that. We'll take you up on that offer. We do have some efforts going away at some individual facilities that are, like, I'll use Lansing as an example. They've made a connection, but we're looking for ways to improve that. And you're exactly right. People that come out of the armed forces, they're used to the regimen, the shift work, the discipline of it all, and our work does appeal to them.
I don't know if they'll ever be used to it, but I think they're probably a little more accustomed to the average Joe.
Okay, but that was a poor choice of words, maybe. As used to it as you
I
can get.
understand, giving you a hard time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Representative Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In reference to the Second Chance Pell Grant, what's the criteria to be eligible for that? And is it just open to everyone?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, well, I think it's the same eligibility requirements as Pell for a student at a college out in the community. They apply the same standards, and I'm not sure what those specifics are. We can certainly get that, but they have to meet the same criteria. And our higher ed partners, kind of help walk them through that and help them with that process. There's a payment schedule they have to complete, those type things. But I think it's the same as out in the community, for a student out in the community.
Thank you.
Additional questions? All right, not seeing any. I will emphasize what the Secretary mentioned earlier about his willingness to allow you to tour his facilities. And I would strongly encourage you to do that. And I've had the chance to tour many of his facilities, and it gives you a whole different perspective and understanding on the challenges that they face. And so if anybody would like to do that, reach out to me, reach out to Randy or the Secretary, and we'll certainly arrange for that to happen. Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for sharing your information. Randy has one more thing he would like to follow up on, but we thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.
Keith and I were comparing notes back to, Randy Bowman again, sorry, back to Mr. Russman's question, Representative Russman's question about the differentials. So those are approved by you all in finance through 2023. The governor's budget request does request you to approve those again this year, and there's funding in there. So
Excellent. Glad to hear that. I've heard from many people that if those went away, so would they. So totally understand. And being a member of this committee, you will by default hear from some of the folks that work within KDOC that have questions. So don't be afraid to reach out. These folks are a fantastic resource to, and direct those to Randy. He's their legislative guy, and he's happy to share his information. So with that in mind, we will be adjourned for the day, and we'll see you guys on